a point where a lot of traditional businesses that the banks were involved are either no longer feasible, or the capital requirements of the new regulations do not make them attractive. And I mean, they are even now talking about coming with Basel IV, and that will generate more difficulties, particularly for banks in the emerging markets in areas such as trade. We have, I mean, around 700 financial sector clients, a lot of those banks in the emerging markets, probably the largest network of relationships of any institution in the world. So we are in constant contact with these clients, and we are seeing that these clients in some countries are facing some difficulties. We know, for example, that there are countries already in the South Pacific or in the Caribbean that no longer have any correspondent banking relationships. So this is creating, I mean, a very serious problem for banks. To that, you have to add the fact that I mean, we are living in an environment of very low interest rates, particularly in the developed world. I mean, where you are seeing global banks that are now paying negative interest, or in other words, collecting for keeping the people's money in the banks, and this is permeating as well to the emerging markets. The traditional banking business, which was simply getting a deposit, paying for a deposit, and then lending the money at a spread, is a business that was a traditional banking business, and that is changing because of the international environment. And lastly, there is the entire revolution that is being brought upon by fintech. And right now, with peer-to-peer lending and so forth, the fintechs are beginning to capture traditional banking clients, particularly in the retail sector, and they are simply using the banks as white label providers of capital, using the bank's balance sheet. But as we all know, I mean, where the money is made is by having the client, because once you have the client, I mean, you can sell to the client a credit card, but you can also, I mean, give a mortgage. If the client resides in the fintech, I mean, the fintech will decide where the mortgage goes and where the credit card goes, and the bank is left without the business.
So what's the solution? What are you offering to the various banks that I'm sure you're speaking to, especially here at Felaban?
Okay, well, of course, one of the solutions for the banks is that they have to embrace technology. One of the things that we're trying to do, we had a conference of CEOs of fintech companies in Washington a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things we're doing is we are connecting some of these fintech companies with banks. So we are, on the one hand, working with these fintech companies to find new technologies, but at the same time we are pushing traditional financial institutions to embrace technology. Finally, if you look at the objectives that some of these fintech companies have, is that they want some kind of an exit for what is a venture capital type investment, and the banks are the natural takers of this technology. So this is one example, okay? But there will be some fintechs that will grow on their own and will be eating the business away from the bank. So some of the other areas, and this is what we just presented here at Felaban, is starting offering different types of products. And one very good example of this type of products have to do with sustainable investments. Now, the traditional sustainable investments are usually around wind farms and hydro and solar.